Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 2 of Flag on the Play. I am fired up, ready to go, and I hope that you guys are enjoying the new format for our regular shows with Mike covering the offense and me covering the defense. I know it's just a little bit easier for us to get the workload done while maintaining our lives outside of here. But let's get down to business. This week we are covering the AFC North, which consists of Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Baltimore, and Cincinnati. In all honesty, this may be the most intense division, and these games have histories of high penalties and high fines, especially between Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. I am sorry if this seems rushed. I can't do football full-time just yet, so I have another job in editing. I edit all of our episodes on top of doing the recordings with Mike, and then on top of doing this little thing, so there's a lot going on. And I apologize if it's a little short, but without further delay, let's kick this thing off. So we're going to start off with the most penalized team in terms of total flags thrown, the Steelers. The surprising part is they are tied in the division with Baltimore for 125 accepted flags, but had a higher total of 152 total flags thrown. I have said it before, and I will say it again. Offensive holding is the most called penalty in the game, in the league, every year. And while I don't like seeing it called, I do feel that some teams handle it better than others. The Steelers just handle it. They have an offense to counteract these penalties. And though I don't like seeing them, and I don't think that, offenses should be having them, they're proof, considering they went to the AFC divisional game, that some teams are more capable of overcoming it than others. The top 4 noticeable penalties that the Steelers committed were offensive holding, called 26 times for 249 yards, false start, 23 for 111 yards, unnecessary roughness, 13 for 179 yards, and defensive pass interference, or DPI, called 9 times for 174 yards. Now, I do hope you guys are sitting down for this because the combined penalties mentioned total 713 yards. Just going to let that sink in for a bit. I have no words for that. It's just unacceptable. I don't care how good your offense is, what's going on. It's not something that should be happening. This is easily 2 games worth of total offensive yards for this team. 2 whole games. 2 60-minute games. Now, if you divide the number of penalties by 16, the number of games in a regular season, it would average out to 44 penalty yards a game. Now, those terms, it doesn't seem bad, especially since some teams have games that are better than others, but the total number when added up is just astounding. The false starts make me angry. We all know how I feel about false start penalties. But the DPI number is just amazing. 9 for 174 yards is a lot. The good side, fortunately, is I don't see it as a long-term problem. The 2 players that were guilty of most of the DPI penalties were Burns and Cockrell, which were their 2 young corners. They have a combined 18 DPI calls for 150 yards. And I expect that not to be the case next year. As they will learn how to interact with the receivers, they're just going to get better as a whole group. So that I expect to change. The person that does upset me is the veteran lineman DeCastro, who had 9 offensive holding and 6 false starts called against him. I heard his number a lot in games I watched where we analyzed the Steelers. Luckily, only 12 of those were accepted, but the total loss was around 82 yards. And I hope he can get those down to like 40, half that. But yeah, I don't foresee these numbers this long term. So now unfortunately, I have to kind of move quickly just to make sure we stay on track. And like I said, I apologize for it. There's just a lot going on. This airs tomorrow, and I have to make sure I get everything done. We move on to the number 2 most penalized team in the AFC North, the Baltimore Ravens. Tied with the Steelers for 125 accepted penalties, they were given second place since only 139 total flags were thrown. Once again, our penalty list looks familiar, consisting of 34 offensive holding for 332 yards, 15 false starts for 74, 10 unnecessary roughness for 145, And finally, DPI 9 for 134. When combined, we have a sum total of 685 yards. Now, the 74 yards is insignificant here in my opinion. Being the fact that it didn't even break 100, it's about what you would expect a team to get. But what kills me is the DPI and offensive holding. And the reason for this is I know of at least 2 instances where 50-plus yard runs were negated because of offensive holding. And that's really aggravating for an offense that's considered average and does struggle from time to time. And especially an offense that seems to not utilize Flacco's arm. And they need to work on their blocking techniques. It's unacceptable. And this offense has a tendency to struggle, and those penalties just aren't helping. The winner for this most penalized player for this team goes to another corner. Well, really, tackles were last week, corners this week. Tavon Young with a team leading 9 penalties for 127 yards. 5 of those penalties were DPI. He's got some growing to do too. He's got to learn to turn and look at the ball. A lot of these corners just aren't turning and looking back at the ball. They're focusing on the receivers, and that's going to get you called every time. Alright, now we're halfway through there, and no, we're not living on any prayers here. And we are at the third place team. This team was both third in accepted penalties, 95, and total flags thrown in the division, 114. Can you guess who it was? Yes, the Browns of Cleveland is correct. The Cleveland Browns. Surprising, huh? Well, they had 2 of the same as the others in the other group, but had a unique one. They had as follows: 21 offensive holding for 196 yards, 21 false starts for 105, and 8 delay of games for 37. The delay of games were most likely due to the simple quarterback roulette that was going on, so I expect those to dissipate soon. Delay of game is also a tricky penalty, and you can't hold a team against it because sometimes it's a strategy penalty. They try to get you to jump off sides on a hard count for a 3rd and short, and they're willing to take the 5-yard penalties, so you can't always fault them for having a lot of delay of game penalties. But in this case, I think it's the fact that they were playing quarterback roulette. The other penalties, however, were committed by our old friend, the offensive tackles, and a wide receiver, which makes me really mad. Pasture and Irving, 2 offensive tackles, had a combined 14 penalties for 102 yards. What made me super mad was the number 1 wideout, Terrell Pryor, had 6 penalties for 45 yards. 4 of those were false starts. And I don't even know. A wide receiver committing a false start makes me even more angry than a lineman that commits a false start. Seriously, dude, you're not helping the team. But in his defense, this was his first year as a wide receiver. So I do expect that will go away and he will get better over time. Once again, we drop down to the last place team in the division, and it gets frustrating because there's not much to talk about. The last place and penalty teams are usually really disciplined, and there's not a whole lot going on. And for us, that team this week is the Cincinnati Bengals. 4th place in the AFC North, and actually they were the least penalized team overall. 88 accepted out of 104 total called, which is good for them. Only 16 false starts, 16 offensive holding, and 10 unnecessary roughness calls for 80, 157, and 135 yards respectively, for a combined total of 372. Almost half of what the second place Ravens had. The team leaders were Kirkpatrick with 9 penalties for 82 yards. 3 of those were DPI. Behind him was Jones, who had 7 penalties for 52 yards. 3 of them were defensive holding. Just a little bit of polishment of technique, but honestly, this is what the benchmark for penalties for teams should be. I want to thank you all for joining me again. I know this one was about 5 minutes shorter than the last one, and I am sorry. There's just a lot going on. We're marketing the channel, editing. It's just a lot on my plate. But if you want me to keep going with this, please like, comment, and subscribe below to keep up with us. Give us a view of what you think of these penalties in the comment section below. And I hope to see you all next time. Play ball, guys.